Hello, scenic sculptors. Danny here with Privateer Press. Today we're going to create some scene-stealing factory bases for our minis. Let's get started. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a metal-plated factory base. Our tools and materials include a rotary leather punch, our Privateer Press hobby clippers, our hobby knife, a metal straight edge or ruler, 2 different grits of sandpaper. This is 320 grit and this is 400 grit. A 40mm base, which we'll be using to create our base, 30mm base, and a piece of very thin sheet styrene. You want to make sure that it doesn't overlap the lip of the base. I've also cut the same piece of sheet styrene to a strip that is 1/4 of an inch wide. So let's get started. Our first step in making this base is to cut a circular piece of styrene that will fit inside of our 40mm base. To do this, I use a 30mm base as a template. You can see that the 30mm base fits almost perfectly inside of the 40, which is giving us a little bit of room, which we'll take advantage of later to create the separation between our plates. I set that on the piece of styrene, and I use a mechanical pencil to draw a fine line around our base. I then take our hobby knife, carefully cut this circle out. And do your best to cut it as cleanly as you can, but we can always go in later. Circles are pretty hard to cut. Clean that up with our sandpaper. So you don't want to press too hard. You want to give it a light cut. It's such a thin piece of styrene. Should be able to go around it once and snap your piece right out of there. So there we have it. So I'm going to take the 320 grit, the coarser sandpaper. So I'll go in and I'll try to sand some of these edges a little bit more. Make it all clean and nice. It's just kind of ironic because we're going to do this like beat up factory circle metal thing, right? But you want it to kind of cleanly fit against the outer edges of your 40mm base. And I'll go in with our finer sandpaper. This is 400 grit, 600 also works pretty well. And we're just gonna give it one more little sand over, just to smooth it out, make it not quite as rough. All right, so now you can test fit it into your 40mm base. And I'm pretty happy with that. So at this point, I'm going to flip it upside down. I'm going to draw a slight line right here. That's going to tell me where the slot is, because we need to make sure that wherever we cut it, we cover up that slot with this piece of styrene. I'm going to go over here. I'll use my straight edge. I'll draw a line further out from the line that we created, just so we know that we're not going to overlap, or that we are going to overlap that slot, so that we know we aren't going to see through our base. Give that 2 light cuts, and I will snap it. All right, so now I'm going to take this. I'm going to try to line up my ruler nicely on the edge here with the edge of the styrene, because we know that if our ruler is nice and not beat up, it's a nice 90-degree angle. We'll use that to cut another section of this piece out. Score it, snap it, we're good to go. So you can see there isn't much of a gap between these 2 plates. So at this point, we might want to widen those by removing a little bit more material from each edge. I go back in with my knife. I'm just going to remove a little bit more material, and I'm going to press hard. Be careful not to cut yourself, so that it actually cuts all the way through and removes that material. Go in on this edge. Move a tiny bit here. And that should be good for what we're trying to do here. So now we're ready to start adding detail to our pieces. We're going to add rivets using our handy rotary leather punch. You can see here there are a series of holes I don't want to go with the smallest hole, but I do want to go with a very small one. I'm going to save the smallest hole for our tiny little details that we'll add at the end. So I start by taking this punch, and I go from the corner. I'm not going to add rivets along the rounded edge because that would really create a weird illusion on the base. It would look like this rounded metal plate. And we want it to look like it fades into the rest of the table, so we're only going to add it on the flat edges. I take my punch here, and I go in, and I start at the corner, and I punch very lightly. You don't want to press that hard, because if you do, you're going to punch all the way through, and your whole part's ruined. You kind of have to start over. So just a little bit at a time. If you go all the way through, you're going to punch a hole. That's going to be really frustrating. So I go corner, corner. I try to find the middle. Punch one in the middle. Go right between those. Split the difference. Do it again on the other side. That's just a quick way of kind of evenly spacing your rivets. You can see here, so we don't have to spend all that time measuring and all that. It'll look good enough for us. I'll do the same thing on our two small pieces. Start on the corner. Lightly press, other corner. And we'll add another one right there. So I've taken some P3 hobby glue and put it on a piece of scrap styrene. So you can see here, I use my hobby knife and I lightly push it into the styrene. You don't want to push all the way through. You're literally just using the blade to pick up your piece of styrene. You want to lightly drop it into the glue. You get some on there. You can get it off a little bit. Lightly put it in place. And before adding the other piece, I'll take my knife and just try to carefully true up that edge if I wasn't perfect when I glued it down. So now I'm going to take this big piece. We'll do the same thing. Dip it in a little glue. Carefully drop that piece on. There we go. We've created the proper gap that we wanted. We're going to let that dry. We'll go in and add some more detail. So at this point, I'm going to add more detail. I want to overlap one of these lines with a piece of panel. I'm going to take that strip of styrene that I talked about earlier, and we're going to cut a small section of it to look like a patch that's going across one of the ridges in our metal base. This styrene is the same thickness as the styrene we used for this base. And so now we're going to take our leather punch, we're going to move it to the smallest size, since this is just supposed to be this kind of detailed patch. I'm going to punch each corner. And again, be careful that you don't punch all the way through and ruin the piece. We'll add another section right here. Another two rivets. Right there. We'll go in from the other side. We'll cut that edge. Get this nice little rectangular plate that we're going to add on. Now we need to decide where we're going to put it. I didn't care about leaving space with our rivets before because I didn't know exactly where I wanted it, and I wanted all of our rivets to be evenly spaced. Now that's easier to do if we're not leaving a few of them out to then put on this panel later. All you have to do is take your hobby knife, scrape off both of those rivets carefully. You want to make sure that you don't gouge into the styrene too much. That will create a space for your panel to lay flat. Pick this up with our knife, drop it into the glue again. Maybe pop some of that off. We'll drop it across that edge and let it dry. If you have any excess, you can kind of wipe it away with your finger or dab at it with a piece of paper towel. As you can see, that crosses that gap nicely. It looks like it's riveted in. And the illusion we're trying to create, I think, is reading well. So now, for the final level of detail, You're going to take your hobby knife again and make sure it's very sharp. It may have dulled at this point, and you want it to be extremely sharp. So you're going to take your knife, just go in, and relieve some of these edges carefully. That's going to create that kind of rough, chipped metal look. You might even go in and go straight down to create an area where your blade will stop against. Cut right up to it, then pop out that triangular piece. You might also add some scratches, which means create a line, then just go right up against it, carefully carve that out, and remove that piece of styrene. You can use your blade to just kind of scrape out any excess. Go in on this side, kind of beat that metal up a little bit more. So at this stage, our base is nice and clean and done, and it's ready for painting. Here's how it's gonna look when you paint it. You can do whatever type of metal you want. If you want that patch to be bronze, brass, whatever you want, add some nice weathering. Just make it pop, and you have a simple, nice metal base for your army. Our bases are industrial, impressive, and ready to bring some awesome to the table. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe for more videos and check out the links below for more in this series and additional information on the P3 Hobby line. Hello, fellow makers of awesome. Danny here with Privateer Press. Can I please do that?
You do it at the end, like that dude in CSI. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Let's get started.
Ready to go?